Hello and welcome to Sim.bc, where right now is 13:52 in the afternoon, and today we're going to talk about one of the most important things. I'd say no, not one of the most important things, but one of the things that I'm most invested in when it comes to the project that we're going to take up. So bear with me, in a minute, just a disclaimer, whatever you want to call it, in before, and that is that I'm still sick, so I'm going to miss the gym today as well. Makes me feel like I'm losing control, makes me feel like feelings inside is boiling up to the surface, makes me feel like so I'm maybe a bit sick today as well, which pisses me right off, and usually I try to refrain from fruitful language, so to say, language of an adult nature, but today I might not be able to do that since I have such a passionate stand on when it comes to what we're going to talk about today. Not wrath actually, but principles and pride. Because it's one of the most interesting, I'd say, sins that's out there. One of the most idiotic ones, And I'm going to step on people's toes today because I just don't simply care. One, because I'm sick, So let me have it. And two, because I have very strong opinions about this. So bear with me before we start this. This is going to be a really biased video on this topic. But what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about what is evil. That's what we're trying to decipher. That's what we're trying to arrive at. What is evil really when you get down to it? What is evil really when you think about it? What is evil really in relation to other stuff? Does it need to be in relation to other stuff? Does it not need to be in relation to other stuff? And in order to come to any form of conclusion, we need to go through different things like stereotype, management, like envy, talking about envy, all these 7 deadly sins, and that is what we're actually currently are doing. And we're on the last one before the mini review of this little project. And which one is the last sin that we're gonna talk about? Well, it is that pride. And I know that pride doesn't necessarily have principles in them, but we're probably going to discuss them anyway. We'll see how the nature of this flows. So I've been looking up some different things about pride. And pride is basically just the sense that, you feel really accomplished. But yet again, we're going back to the same theory, to the same kind of nature that we've been discussing before, is that if you feel inflated, so to say, in a good way, in a positive way, then it might not be pride in a sense, then it might be that you're feeling accomplished, that it is an accomplishment that you've been fulfilling. However, if you have a negative feeling towards something, towards an accomplishment, towards the inflation of your own ego, then it's probably pride. And what is pride based on? Well, as I said, this is kind of where the biases come in. I haven't actually found any source on this, but I've tried, mates. I've really tried. Yet again, when you're looking at the 7 deadly sins and trying to find sources, you're looking for what makes pride bad? And people are like, because it's a sin. And you're like, but what is it that makes that sin bad? And they're like, well, because it's a sin, duh. And you're just like, yes, but what makes that sin bad? And they're like, because it's a sin. And I'm like, I know. But like, what does it make bad? Anyway, you're trying to deep dive into it and you don't really find anything. But pride, in the sense, what makes pride bad is the inflation of your ego, yet again giving in to the ego of yourself, not being able to have the self-discipline to stand against it. The same old that we've been discussing throughout the other videos regarding the same kind of topic, issue, this group of concept. The lack of self-discipline that makes you do things on the expense of other people. However, my interpretation of pride is that it's a really bad thing. And most people are going to be saying, like, how is that an interpretation? Well, my interpretation of pride is that it's based on different principles. Yet again, something that I didn't find any source on. So I'll be my own source for my own view on this topic. Which is good in a way, give me some insights, at least of what I, like, based on what I found, the academic sources that I've been in contact with, that haven't really been touched upon this. So maybe it's a fresh perspective. It probably isn't, because someone in the world probably have very strong opinions about this as well. Maybe that I've been looking into a very fringe minority of the articles and of the literature that exists, and I managed to not actually touch upon principles. Because what I think pride is, it's just an accumulation, yeah, of different principles that makes you feel this pride. Cultural pride is a thing, yeah? We know that you're feeling the principles in the culture that you're having, yeah? Let's say that you have a culture that is based on that everybody stands together as one. Maybe that is then a principle that develops over the course of your life, that everybody stands together. That's just how it is. When I come to a corporation, I want everybody to stand together. Why? Well, because I'm used to that way of thinking, because I'm used to, what should we say? I'm used to that way of behaving that way, right? It's a principle in my life that everybody should be standing together. For instance, it's a principle in a way in my life that people shouldn't be treated unequally based on things that they can't do anything about. So for instance, if they're born in a certain way, if they have a certain language, if they have a certain culture, all of these things that they were born into that they couldn't show, that they couldn't choose for themselves, you can't really judge them on those bases, right? That is my interpretation. That's one of my principles that I go along, right? It's a general direction I try to guide my own life in. But pride is made up by all of these different principles that you can't seem to break, that you can't seem to argue with, and the accumulation of all of these leads to pride that you feel very accomplished, you feel really proud. I was gonna say you feel really happy, and you can really you're trying to back all of your principles, I would say. So your entire life is made up of different principles, different generalizations of the chaotic world around you. Yet again, your brain is trying to find patterns in the chaotic behavior and environment around you. It made stereotypes, it makes generalizations, it groups people, it groups places. It's trying to take all of these different principles and putting them to good use. However, when you try to defend these things, when someone else comes with a well-structured argument, let's say, for why we shouldn't all be in a group right now, all the individuals should be by themselves. Why? I don't know. Maybe we should do a individual self-assessment, like an individual self-assessment test. And it's best to take this test when you don't have everybody else around you. Maybe we're going to join up in focus groups later on and critique each other and present our findings to each other and say what we got. But bears down to it, that we shouldn't be in a group when doing it to begin with, because that might impact the result of the self-assessment test. And I'd argue, yet again, my opinion, that pride really shines through when you're standing up and you're trying to defend your principles of no, we should all stand together right here for no apparent reason, and you can't really come up with a reason as of why everybody should be together that actually makes any logical sense towards the well-structured argument of being individual in this sort of assignment. But you still try to make your absolute best to defend this. And why are you doing this? Well, because these principles is what you've built your entire life upon, right? It's what you're building your structure on. It's what you're building your arguments on. It's what you're building your view of life and your perspectives from. And this is kind of, in my opinion, what creates pride. That this sensation of trying to argue for something that you can't really back in any form or fashion, in any formal way. You're trying to say that this is correct while not being able to provide any logical sense or any sources or any facts for why it is correct. Which is ludicrous to begin with, And I think that everybody can agree on that. That is ludicrous to begin with. However, people are still doing it, which create this sensation of pride, that you're trying to, yet again, defend something that you can't really stand for. Why? Well, because that's just the way it is, in your opinion. And that is something that is truly dangerous. And I know I am supposed to talk about this in relation to pride, or in relation to evil, pride in relation to evil in this video. And sure, I can say lots of things that makes this evil. For instance, if you say that it's evil to harm someone else, and you say that, well, I have a principle that is based on that everybody should be like us, right? That could be a principle. Unfortunately, it can be a principle. And principles are, yet again, as I said, hard to argue with when it comes to people that have a very strong sensation of pride. Because when it comes to pride, they don't tend to back down because they're so proud of their principles, so they can't back down from the principles no matter if it is a good argumentation and a well-structured argument for why they should. They still don't do it. So let's say that one of my one of my principles is, yet again, that everybody should be like me. And then when I find someone who isn't like me, I'm trying to forcefully change them. I would say that that's a harmful behavior, right? Is it evil to execute and to extort and exercise, right? Is it okay to exercise this harmful behavior onto someone else just because they aren't like you? I'd say yes, that's evil. Because you're trying to both say to them how they should structure their lives, which is evil in a way, and it can go even further so that you actually tend to shift towards physical abuse, even though you shouldn't. You absolutely should not. And I can't stress this point enough. If you have even one brain cell, you probably... No, not even probably. You shouldn't tend to use physical violence. It's just that stupid. I mean, how dumb are you on a scale from 1 to 10? We live in a modern society, yeah? How stupid must you be if you tend to change towards physical abuse just because someone isn't like you, yeah? And I know that I'm talking about this as like one principle, one example of how it could be, but still it happens in the world. I see it in different newspapers. People are saying, they don't look like us, they don't behave like us, we must punish them. And I'm like, you stupid piece of shit. I mean, how dumb can you be, right? And I know, this yet again where the bias comes in. But principles are evil in one way. Good principles tend to be good, right? But bad principles tend to be the very worst of the worst of the worst. And these are based on pride, because people with pride is backing these principles up. And you can't actually, yet again, argue with them. So, bad principles, evil. Because it brings on the basis for negative behavior. It brings on the basis for what is bad. And it brings on the basis for not being able to argument or discuss these things like ever, because people yet again feeling pride, so they're defending them for no apparent reason, which is yet again really bad. So I'd say one of the things that I hate, right, and I'm not gonna take this lightly, hate and love is something that I think is like, well, there are like a few things in this world that I love and a few things in the world that I hate, and in between it's like the rest of the world. And I'd say love is like up there with family and friends, right? That's love. That's pure love. That's the one thing that I love. I love looking up at the stars in the sky at night. That's one of the materialistic things, right, that I love. One of the very, very, very few. And on the other hand, we have a very, very, very few amount of things that I really hate. And one of the things that I do hate is principles and pride, because I think that is the basis for what crumbles a society. When someone starts feeling this pride that you can't argue with them, and that tends to lead to principles that aren't questioned, and sometimes they're good, but a lot of the times they're not. And when you have these very, very, very bad and enforced principles in society, especially if you have some sort of leader or some people in a leadership position that feels this strong sense of pride and this strong sense of principle, they are leading and guiding an entire, or should we say, civilization, an entire nation towards something really, really bad. And I hate that. I mean, I probably can't stress this enough. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm really trying to refrain myself and restrain myself to not just trash this this sensation, this notion, right, and this term, but still it's something that I have very strong feelings for, and it's really hard to be unbiased. So just gonna put it out there yet again that I'm biased. So to sum it up, what is it, right? What is this that we've been talking about for the latest 14 minutes, something along those lines? It is that pride is the accumulation of standing for something that is making up your entire life that you can't actually argue about. Now, feeling accomplished and having achievements and doing something like, yet again, fulfilling a goal and feeling good about yourself and being a good leader, you can probably, that's not a thing, because you can probably argue with them all the time, and they're probably really flexible when it comes to change, when it comes to, oh, this actually works, we can use that instead. However, when the person with pride, you can say that we're gonna do this. Why? Well, because we're gonna do that. And you're like, but why? And they're like, because we're gonna do that, you're fired, get out of here, you can't work here anymore. And you're just like, but I just asked why. And it's probably because you're asking, questioning a principle that the leader is feeling a very strong sensation of pride for, but they can't actually argue for it, so that just tends to make them fire people or questioning it instead. Harsh but true. Unfortunately, it tends to happen out there. And principles, yet again, principles are one of those things that builds pride. I'd say the accumulation of different principles that you really feel like you need to stand for that can't be questioned, that can't be argued against, and absolutely on no level can be discussed or can be proven wrong, because that is probably shaking up the entirety of your life, right, in a very weird position, right? Putting you as the proud person, right, in a very awkward position if your principles tend to change, because then what are you really basing your pride on? How is this evil? Well, because, yet again, having good principles, it's a good thing. Having bad principles that can't be questioned, can't be argued with when you're in any form of leadership position, having influence over somebody else, and well, it just writes itself now, doesn't it? You having any form of influence over other people, you having very bad principles, and that being the basis for your pride that can't be questioned, you just tend to do them no matter if they're good or not, and you can't be persuaded to change. That is evil, right? It's influencing a negative perception and a negative behavior in society. I'd argue yet again, keep in mind, these are all just my opinions, right, about the 7 deadly sins now that we're getting to the last of it. Tomorrow we're going to have a bit of a mini review about all of these things. Hopefully it's not going to be as biased video. Yet again, keep in mind, and I can't stress this enough, keep in mind that this is really biased in my opinion alone, and I really hate pride and principle. I think it's the basis for what makes societies crumble in the end when it do crumble. And all the bad things basically stems from pride and greed and gluttony and, well, maybe lust too, actually. Oh, we go into that tomorrow, mates. Have a nice day ahead of you, and I'll see you tomorrow.